engineers, their architects, real estate professionals, security officers, cosmetologists, industrial tradespeople, and more. And your work is what keeps the city running. And your voices are exactly the ones that we want to hear as we roll out this AI initiative for the district. And tonight's session didn't happen by accident. In fact, earlier this year, the Department of Licensing and Consumer Protection, DLCP, surveyed more than 700 licensed professionals across the district. And really that was intended to kind of understand where you're coming from and what you're worried about and what you need from this initiative. And what came back is clear. A lack of training and knowledge, data privacy and security concerns, ethical questions. And these were all top issues that were raised in what professional solace and what respondent solace is that they were holding you back from using AI in your work. In fact, I think the district got a 2.8 out of 5 in terms of the concern about, a lot of concerns, but one of them in particular about job security and the impacts that AI might have on jobs. We also got a 3.4 out of 5 on concerns about ethical implications. And you know, these aren't small numbers, and they're significant because they tell us again what you're thinking about the times that we're living in. And we heard you, so that's why we're here tonight. I also want to share a quick update before I turn it over to my co-chair on progress that's happening across DC government, just to give everyone a sense of where we are right now, a little over 2 years after the mayor's executive order. Now, since our last meeting on April 30th, our cohort 2 agencies, so we call the cohorts are the agencies that are sort of implementing AI strategically and deliberately, have been doing the hard work of really turning planning into action and into implementation. They have all submitted their AI strategic plans for review, and these plans, really what they're intended to do as part of the mayor's executive order is to get those agencies to think strategically about stakeholders, about residents and businesses, and how we leverage technology to make everyone's lives easier. Some of those agencies are the Department of Employment Services, the Department of Buildings, DDOT, the Department of Human Services, the Department of Aging and Community Living, and our Department of Housing and Community Development. So we see this as real progress in the district's commitment to responsible and ethical and intentional AI adoption across our government. So during this meeting, and what you'll hear from us from some of the most knowledgeable voices in AI is how they see workforce development and ethics in particular as we're rolling this out. You'll have a chance to speak as well, so we really want to make this interactive. And I know, and speaking on behalf of the task group, the task force, your feedback is absolutely critical to us and will directly inform how the district shapes its approach to AI. I know it's a bit warm in here as well. We are working on the AC. So we have people working on that now, so we'll get the temperature down. It's been a hot couple days. It's gonna be hot tomorrow. So we are sensitive to that. So we know that that's an issue right now. Before I get started, I'd like to hand things over to our advisory group co-chair, Ms. Stacy Wisnett, who will walk us through the advisory group and set the stage for our discussions this evening. Thank you very much.
Chairman Chris, appreciate it. Good evening. Hope everyone had a good day. I'll start with just saying thank you to Chris, and that I'm Stacy Wisnett. I'm the community co-chair of the Mayor's Advisory Group on AI Values, and it's just great to see so many people here tonight. Before we get into our panels, I want to take a few minutes to do a quick housekeeping protocol and to do a roll call of our advisory team. And I'll start with myself, and just so we can establish our quorum, just make sure you say here as I call your name. Again, Stacy Wisnett, co-chair for the advisory team. ACA Rodriguez.
Here.
All right. Joe Paul.
Present here.
All right. Stephanie Thomas. Here. All right. Tristan Reed.
Here.
Okay. All right. Brad Winterstein.
Here.
All right. Our CTO, Stephen Miller.
Present here.
All right. And Sunil Charbra Khoury.
I'm here.
All right, got Pardon my southern accent.
You're good. Got it right.
Thank you. All right, and right now, I'll do a quick readout from our last meeting on April 30th. We had a really good session, so again, we appreciate you all coming out. We had some really good ideas. It was just a really, really good meeting of participation from the audience. So we are asking for tonight for you to do the same thing, is we want to hear your voices. That's the purpose of us taking the time. So for those joining us tonight, who may not be familiar with the advisory group, we met as a regular part of the district's commitment under the Mayor's Order 2024-2028 to ensure that Washington, D.C.'s approach to artificial intelligence is guided by public values, transparency, and accountability. Our last public session was held on April 30th at the Shaw Library, and I want to share a few highlights from the session. We heard a recap of our November 2025 public listening session, which focused on resident engagement, AI workforce development across D.C.'s government, and the district's new AI procurement handbook. A consistent message from residents was clear. They want easier access to service, clear communication, and a strong privacy protection when it comes to AI. CTO Miller provided an update on AI tools currently under review across the district's agencies, spanning from content creation, process automation, and chatbots. The AI task force continues to evaluate submission on an ongoing basis. We also heard benchmarks updates from the district's mandatory AI training, which launched in February in partnership with Innovate US for all DC's government employees and contractors. And we discussed the agency's AI strategic plan, with Octo becoming the first agency to complete and publish its plan this past March. So shout out to Octo for being the first one. Finally, we preview tonight's session, which is focused on DC's business community and the questions you've been bringing about AI and the professions. So we heard you loud and clear. And again, we just thank you for all your comments. And we hope that tonight that we can keep the momentum going from the last session. So any ideas, no dumb ideas, just throw all the ideas out. We're just happy to hear from you. Which now brings us to our next part of our agenda. And so I'll hand it back over to CTO Miller to introduce tonight's first presenter.
Thank you, Stacy. Thank you, ACA Rodriguez. Appreciate kicking us off here. Our first panel tonight focuses on workforce development and AI literacy, which I think speaks directly to what many of you in this room are navigating every day. To lead that conversation, I want to bring up someone who has spent his career thinking about exactly this intersection of AI, civic life, and organizational transformation. Joe Paul, a member of our advisory board, is founder and CEO of Optima Nova AI, and one of the most thoughtful voices I know on what it takes to move from AI curious to AI ready. Joe, the floor is yours. Panel, come on up.
Panel. I don't know where to sit, so I'm gonna go here, and then feel free to take a seat. I have an extra microphone. Matthias, let's pass it down. There you go. Perfect. How's everybody doing tonight? Good. You know, we need more energy than this. This is live. This is not a studio taping. This is absolutely live. So we, before I get into it, I want to ground this conversation in some facts about our city, and I'll introduce my brilliant panel. And so you can actually really see where we are, okay? 1, DC ranks #1 in America for AI job exposure. More than 55% of DC jobs could be reshaped or replaced by AI. Show of hands, how many people knew that? It's okay to lie, good job, good job. 2, 49,000 DC residents work for the federal government. That's 13% of all DC resident employment. The national average is 1.9%. So DC is uniquely exposed. 3, in the last 12 months, the DC region lost more jobs than any metro in America. 103,900 jobs were lost right here in the district. And 96% of them were federal layoffs. 4, DC's chief financial officer is now projecting 40,000 more federal job losses over the next 4 years, and $1 billion hit to the district's revenue. 5, at the same moment, there are more than 5,000 open AI-related jobs in DC right now. So the opportunity is here. The question is whether DC residents have a path to those jobs, or whether somebody else is going to fill them in. So here's what's encouraging. DC is not standing still. Right, we just became the first major U.S. city in America to require responsible AI training. Shout out to Innovate US, right? For every government employee. We did that in partnership, obviously, with Beth Novak's Innovate US, who you'll hear from in a minute. Wave that. That's Beth. Okay. At the same time, Chelsea Kirkland at the DC Public Library has built a free AI upskilling cohort specifically for laid off federal workers. Shout out to Chelsea. Wave, Chelsea. All right, perfect. All right, and Matthias Oczynski, who is in the weeds with data. And we all know men lie, women lie, but numbers do not, okay? So the real work is happening right now on the ground. So tonight's question for this panel is this: are we doing enough, right? What's still missing, and what happens to DC if we slow down? So before we do that, I wanna take a point of personal privilege to share a little bit about each of these esteemed individuals, okay? So, we're doing good so far? So far, so good? So good so far? All right, fantastic. So, to my immediate left is Chelsea Kirkland. Chelsea leads digital inclusion at DC Public Library, which means she sees at the branch level how DC residents in every ward actually engage with AI. All right, let's hear it for Chelsea. Don't be shy about your class. All right. Beth Novak is the founder of Innovate US and former United States Deputy Chief Technology Officer in the Obama administration. I think that's important. Her organization trains public sector employees across the country in AI and digital skills free of charge. Let's hear it for Beth. And Matthias Oczynski. Matthias is a senior fellow and workforce research lead at Georgetown Center for Security and Emerging Technology, where he studies how AI is reshaping the labor market. So we'll get started with Matthias first. Matthias.
Yeah, I heard it in different ways, but
Matthias is what I'm gonna say, all right? So Matthias, you study which skills are gaining and losing value. If a DC resident walked into a library tomorrow and asked, what should I learn to be employable in 3 years? What's the honest answer? And what's the answer that we're afraid to give?
in terms of what skills are important?
What skills are important? If someone came in right here and said, hey, Matthias, hey, Matthias, I want to be prepared. I lost my job. I don't know what type of skills I need. What do I need to be doing right now to be prepared for the future work?
Yeah, so I think it's two parts to the answers. We recently did a study that we published in, I think, December 2024, where we actually went to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, always has like a projection of which jobs will be growing over the next decade or so. So we took these jobs and then we kind of looked into, we extracted which skills are important for these jobs that are expected to grow. And then kind of, I had to fight with my data team because I wanted to make a word cloud, and my data team hates word clouds. They all like tables better. So I won, luckily. But what was interesting about the skills that matter the most, so about 58% of the skills that will be in high demand are non-technical skills. So it's what we call social skills. It's foundational skills like math, communication, writing, and technical skills only made up around 27% of this. And it's not surprising. So it's also, there's a Harvard Business study from last year that shows that on average, technical skills now have a shelf life of 2.5 to 5 years. So if you pay a lot of money for an education that gives you a lot of technical skills, it's better to supplement this with some social skills, because I think what this future generation or what's happening to the job market right now is it's going to be disrupted much more frequently than what happened in my parents' lifetime. And the skills that matter the most are those that give you kind of resiliency to move with these changes. And this is basically where the non-technical skills really shine. So that's the first part of the answer. I think that's where, and we do a lot of this at Georgetown as well. Like I'm talking to a lot of my colleagues at Georgetown, like what does it mean for how higher education has changed, or how we need to change the education pipeline in general. I'm from Germany, and we have a lot of this country is kind of strangely called non-traditional career pathways, which we actually have this as a tradition that people go to trade schools and do an apprenticeship. And here, I think we see patches of this developing, but I think this is where we could do much more in terms of building this up and have this at a broader scale. So I think we need a better way of retraining people and for those skills that make them more resilient. And the second part is AI skills, or what some people call AI literacy, even though they don't define it. Some don't define it so well. And there was a recent study that compared Germany, the UK, and the United States in terms of how well people do with AI skills, because I think this comes back when we talk about adoption. What people often measure here, because they're really proud of the fact that the adoption rate of AI is so high, is like the quantity of adoption, like how fast are people adopting AI. But what's really ever measured is like how well people can use AI. And so this study actually looked into which groups have the better AI skills to actually apply them and use the tools to the maximum benefit. And the funny thing was Germany came out number one because they have a very structured approach in teaching AI skills. And in the US, it's often the case, and this is why it's good what you're doing, because in the US, often a manager would just say, oh yeah, just use all these tools. And people don't really know what to do with them, and they don't use it to the best of the benefits. And the study really, what I find amazing is it ended with high confidence does not equal high competence. So people had a lot of confidence because like, well, I'm using ChatGPT every day, but it doesn't mean that you're using it well. So what we need is really a more structured approach in teaching this. So I think the two-part answer is basically the AI skills plus these social skills, foundational skills. Those are the combination that will matter a lot.
I double tap that. I mean, if we look at artificial intelligence and AI is designed to basically handle a lot of the technical, laborious work that shouldn't be done by humans anyway, then if you know how to communicate with this tool that should be treated as a teammate, then soft skills is what's in demand: communication, strategic thinking, critical thinking, etc. Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Matthias.
Thanks.
Perfect. Let's go to Chelsea. So your boots on the ground here in DC. I've known you for a while. In one specific story example, what is something happening right now in DC on the ground that tells you we're either ahead or behind where we need to be in terms of AI in the workforce?
Yeah, I mean, as you well know, DC is both of those things. Depends on what neighborhood you're in and what community you're talking to. I think that for what that looks like when it's happening well, is people are actively engaging in public with AI tools and with each other. So working on projects, building things together with other people, and to Matthias's point, sort of that discernment that comes from using tools in public with other people, I think is really key. On the flip side, we see a lot of folks in the libraries who are using AI. It's really unavoidable, as we all know, when you get on a computer. And it just compounds a sense of overwhelm that I think a lot of people have. I think the current digital divide is really about confusion and overwhelm. People are on their phone doing everything they need to do, and it's really confusing as to why this works and this doesn't, or what this box is popping up and talking to me like a human is about, and what do you mean that's not a human, and this, that, and the other thing. So I think that we have, on the one hand, a lot of folks that are just trying to wade through this and make sense of it in their busy schedule on their own without really understanding what they're interacting with. And that's been going on with the digital divide, but I feel like a lot of the AI embedded tools that they're now interfacing with are more confusing. And on the other hand, we have a lot of, DC is really rich with these sort of communities, these meetup type of scenes, and you see a lot of folks doing really cool stuff in those communities and really leveraging the public space in order to test out new ideas, work on projects, start businesses, and that type of thing. So I think that you're seeing both sides happening. And then we have, of course, our displaced feds and other folks whose jobs are being threatened, sort of just trying to figure out which way to turn. Some of those folks are leveraging resources like the library very well, which I hope I get to talk about soon. But yeah, I think we are looking at sort of a dire extremes.
Let's talk about those resources. Well, it's top of mind. Is it
Right now.
soon enough? Is now soon enough?
Sure.
No, we jump to bed.
Yeah, so I think one thing that we have going at the library, and some of my collaborators are in the room, is an upskilling group that meets regularly where people kind of get together in small group projects. Anyone can come and join, pick something to work on using a design thinking mindset, which I think really highlights some of those soft skills that Matthias is talking about, the discernment building, and then gets together and builds in public and shows off what they have. And I think that really helps for those that are looking to transition, especially those. One thing that I've noticed for feds and folks who are in government like myself is that we're not used to an experimental mindset. That's not something that we're really encouraged to do, right? For obvious reasons, people are concerned about privacy. But when it comes to learning a new tool and figuring out what works and what doesn't and how to use it well, you have to adopt an experimental mindset. So you might have to leverage some of these communities like the Upskilling Labs, which meets at the library, or any of these other fabulous meetups that happen in public spaces in DC in order to really build those skills. Because otherwise, I think we kind of get stuck in this sort of more prescriptive way of thinking, and we don't get a chance to exercise that level of discernment where we determine how to use the tools well.
Extremely helpful. No substitute for peer-to-peer learning. Innovate US, founded by Novak. So Innovate US trains public sector workers across multiple states. What's one thing other governments are doing that DC should beg, borrow, or steal? And then the other side of that is one thing that DC is doing that you recommend to others. But let's start with the first one. What's one thing that other governments are doing that you've seen and that DC should absolutely borrow?
Ooh, so the good part, let me give first a shout out to, thanks for the credit to me, but the great part about Innovate US is it is a peer-to-peer learning community. It is a free platform where people are teaching and learning from one another. And I should say, even though it's intended to be sharing among all 50 states and cities, we have partnerships with Boston and Miami and DC, as well as all 50 states. We now have Innovate Bhutan and Innovate EU, and we're seeing people from 80 countries coming online because there is this hunger to learn from one another about the common challenges that we all face. And especially in public service and public sector and people who are committed to doing mission-driven work, I think there is just this eagerness to share what's working and what's not, to work through problems together in the same way that you're seeing here in the library, people sort of puzzling through how do we take advantage of these new tools to good end and to good use. So first, a shout, am I allowed to start with a shout out to DC? Was that allowed first?
Please, yes.
We'll take it.
So, thank you to Stephen and his team and to Octo and for having me as part of this conversation. But the first, the biggest, the bestest in the sense of committing to train all of its workforce in AI, not saying only leadership or only technical people, but recognizing that these tools in particular are things that are guided. This new generation of generative AI is something that is guided by plain language. So anybody can learn this. So whether you are the person taking out the trash or the traffic cop directing traffic or the government worker sitting behind a screen writing memos, everybody has the opportunity to use these tools, and also I think has the obligation to learn how we can use these tools for public purpose and public good. So DC is the paragon, and in fact, we had a meeting earlier today with those 50 states online where DC got to say, hey, we got to train, we've trained now almost everybody, or a very large majority in a very, very short amount of time in that learning. And that learning continues not just with courses around AI, but 3 to 4 workshops a week. Those workshops are, again, people standing up and saying, I have something to teach one another, and sharing peer-to-peer. So every Friday we have Prompting Lab, hosted by the city of Miami, the state of Colorado, the District of Columbia, Pennsylvania, and others, saying, we're going to teach one another, come with a problem, sort of like office hours that you might have had in college or grad school, or where you came to work out that problem set with your, your teacher. So people working on problems with one another. So I think the thing that everybody else has to learn is about the importance of that investment in learning and upskilling, not for its own sake, but because the learning translates into behavior change in the sense of what we're measuring, what we're seeing nationally is people who are learning how to use these tools not only develop more confidence, but more competence, and that is more tasks that they know how to do to serve the public. So ultimately our goal is making democracy work better, making government work better by making the people who drive our institutions work more effectively. So that's the major lesson here is what we all can learn, public and private sector, from what DC is doing. Maybe I'll take 30 seconds to say what we could be doing better, and then we can come back to how we do more of that. So I think 2 quick shout outs. One thing is doing more to address some of these workforce challenges and problems. I used to be the head of AI for the state of New Jersey. One of the things that we did was create a free tool where people could do some of the things that you're talking about, upload their resumes, understand what their skills are, what the labor market is showing about where the next job is for them. So I think there's a lot of these labor market issues that we can begin to solve with better collaboration with universities, with research, and with tools. Second big thing is around listening and conversation. It's doing this kind of meeting and more of it. So what I'm really excited about is the jurisdictions that are going out. You taught us how to pronounce Matthias, so I'll give a shout out to Hamburg, Germany, in your honor. Though you are not from Hamburg, but I will shout out anyway that the city of Hamburg has gone out and built free AI tools so that every time they make a planning decision, they are doing it with the benefit of public input. Not just asking people to talk, how shall we redesign this train station or change this park, but to be able to help the government to listen to what people are telling them. So AI is not, the web enabled all of us to talk. What AI is good at doing is synthesizing information. It's helping institutions to listen. So it means that places like Hamburg don't make a decision now about how urban planning works in that city without the benefit of public input. So that's what we all need to be doing more of. Okay, let me stop there.
Amazing. Quick follow-up. The trainings, the peer-to-peer, is it virtual, hybrid, in person?
Well, yes. 200 and about 250,000 people trained online, not limited to government. That's why we have people showing up from Bhutan, where, by the way, I might add, we will be launching our in-person training. That's because I want to go there on vacation. No, that's a joke. I mean, the vacation part is serious. The live learning in Bhutan is, I will aspire to that. Most of what we do is online because our goal is to bring people together free, cheap, and easy across borders to share common problems. So for example, next week or in a few weeks, there's a session about what will sound like a very wonky topic, but really, really important, which is how government answers the phone. How do we get better, faster, cheaper, and make citizens wait less to get information about a government benefit, a service, health insurance, 311, whatever it may be. So we have places like DC coming together with states like New Jersey or other jurisdictions that have done work to modernize how they answer the phone. Some of that is tech. Some of it is just soft skills and better design, but they're all seeing improvements and going to share that with one another so that hopefully everybody can replicate that and all of us can spend less time waiting on the phone and more time not just getting served, but doing other things that matter in our lives. So all virtual, all free, anybody, you don't have to be in government, you can come on and listen, participate and join at innovateus.org. But we are increasingly coming in also in person. Since we have 300 different faculty all over the country, we can send them into places to be boots on the ground and help with some of that in-person upskilling, that high touch thing where you really need to spend a day in a room together. An hour on Zoom doesn't really do, but our goal is in the first place to make it free, cheap, and easy for anybody to learn from their desk.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Beth, for your work. Matthias, got it right.
Thank you.
You've studied AI adoption across US and Europe, and I'm always curious about research and numbers. Tell us one number or one finding that this room should walk away, and it may even shock some folks that people just don't know. You're closer to the numbers. share one or two findings that people should really be aware about.
Well, maybe not so much a number, but more of a story actually, because I think that illustrates better also the parts that you said about listening to people. I want to start with what we saw over the past weekend. I know who followed these commencement speeches where the young people kind of booed whenever AI came up, that AI is the future, and I think that's part of the problem, that the way AI is being implemented often doesn't take into account a public debate on what we want AI to do. I think if the feeling is there's a couple of tech bros, for lack of a better word, in California who basically say, I was recently at a roundtable and there was one self-proclaimed technologist from California at the table, and he said, we should be the only ones advising politicians on AI, because we are the only ones who understand what's going on. And it's like, well, since all of us are affected by it, I think this should be a democratic process. And I think this is exactly what you talked about. And so this is kind of in the context of this one study that we're doing right now. We're looking into how firms adopt AI in Germany and the United States. And Germany, we didn't choose Germany because I'm German, although it gives me reason to visit. But it's because Germany and Austria are the only countries in the world who have what's called works councils. So they're elected employees, body of employees that have legal rights for co-determination. And in both Germany and Austria, that includes, they have a say in how AI is implemented in the company, what technology is implemented for what use, and how people are being trained for it. And none of this exists here, so we kind of were interested in, does this affect the speed of adoption? Does this affect how people perceive AI and the transparency and data privacy and so on? And that really, I think, speaks to, we don't have the report out yet, so it will come out in the fall, but some early findings are that it does not slow down AI adoption, which we often hear when we talk about to US employers about it, that may be a good idea to include employees early on. But it's actually a better process because when you have an employee who understands their job on a day-to-day basis, what they do on a day-to-day basis, they know best how AI can help them to do their job better. If you're kind of a middle manager and you've never done this job, like we talked to a couple of here in the United States who basically implement AI tools, and then we talk to the workers, and it's like, well, actually, it does nothing for me. It doesn't optimize my workday because my manager doesn't understand my job. And so this comes back to what you're saying, I think giving people an input, and especially giving workers more of a say in the implementation and adoption process is really benefiting the company overall, because that actually then increases your productivity, that increases your acceptance of the technology, and it also leads to better training. So I think ultimately it's actually good for the company as well. And I think, don't really have a number yet, but I think this probably, one of the key takeaways for us is that we need to include people more in the discussion about AI in general.
No question about it. We need to treat this less like a tech adoption and more as an all hands on deck. Artificial intelligence is a personal journey. The more you realize how to apply it personally and professionally to your specific use case, the better everyone benefits. All right. So we'll wrap up with one more question. I'm huge on call to action. Right? We have folks in here from the business community, from DC, AI, from everywhere. If everyone in this room could do one thing differently on Monday morning, well, let's say tomorrow morning, right? Time's moving pretty fast. What would you ask them to do? All right, we'll start with you, Chess.
I would say, well, I definitely like the listening to your workers, if possible, about AI. But I think that there's just define a problem that you want to solve and do some exploration as to whether it can be solved with AI, and who on your team might be able to work with you on that and come up with some little prototype as a group and just see how that feels. I think that's one thing. But the key is really getting some other people on board with you to work together with, I think is really how this starts to make sense. It's having someone to bounce ideas off of, having someone to talk to. If you don't have a workplace, if you're a job seeker, come on down to the library. But I think really sort of working through something impactful that is part of your daily life in a group with other people, seeing what tools work for that and what don't and why is something I would suggest just to get started. Yeah.
Beth?
Ooh, I just want to +1 that, so I'll just sort of repeat that. The same thing you just said in different words, which is starting with the problem that you're trying to solve. And I think you're hearing that from all of us. It's not about the technology. Really, this is just a better word processor and a better calculator by some means. So what we're really asking is, what are the problems that we're trying to solve? And especially when we focus our attention on mission-driven public purpose problems, we have way too many tech pros talking about how to make another dime and another dollar. And this is not to discount the importance. All of us, just want to have well-paying jobs, but we also want to do good work in the world to serve our communities. So again, we need to regulate these tools self-evidently, but at the same time, to the extent to which we can educate ourselves about what we can do differently and better in our own lives, in our own communities, to serve our communities with the tools that we have available to us, that is the good life, the mission-driven life, the purpose-filled life. And I think then we are using these tools in ways that will be both transformative and the way we should be focused on using them, not as an excuse to fire workers, to upend the economy, to do all these negative things. We have so many problems to solve, and we should be using these tools to solve them.
Yes.
Yeah, agree with everything you both of you said. I think it's for the business community. I think it's really this trying to involve workers really early on, and also I think we often talk about the workforce. I think it's also important to understand the workforce is not a monolith. So like you have different parts of the workforce that have different needs for what kind of training they need and what how AI might be of use to them. So I think also thinking about this distinction of like tailor the training to the specific workforce needs that you have, and not treating the workforce as one big entity, because that's definitely not going to help.
Excellent. The only thing I will add is, as a personal charge, is start somewhere. Artificial intelligence is a personal journey, and it's a relationship, truly. If you treat AI like a vending machine, 50 cents in, candy bar out, that's exactly what it'll be to you. If you treat AI like a thought partner, it will be that to you as well. So step one, download one of these applications, whether it's ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, and introduce yourself. You're going on a date with AI, right? And you don't get married on the first date, right? It doesn't know enough about you, and you don't know enough about it. So introduce yourself. Tell it what you do, what you are. And the prompt is simply introduce yourself. You can attach your resume, your card, take a picture of it, upload it. But you need to ask AI, based on what I've shared with you, tell me comprehensively how you can help me level up, right? What can you do for me? And you'll see, oh yeah, I can do this, I can do that, do that. Again, it's a relationship. The more you engage with AI, the more it'll engage with you. All right, let's hear it for our esteemed panel members. Don't stop clapping, y'all.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, before we move on to our second panel, we have something I think is one of the most important parts of tonight. This is a listening session, and that means we're here to listen. We're going to open the floor for a facilitated conversation on what the future of the DMV workforce, the National Capital Region workforce, however you want to look at it, what it looks like in the age of AI. Your perspective is data, and we take that data seriously. To lead that conversation, I want to introduce from our innovation team at Octo, Dr. Lindsay Quarles. Lindsay works at the intersection of technology and public engagement, and she is exactly the right person to help us make sure every voice in this room gets heard. Thank you, Lindsay. Come on up.
Thank you so much. So, all right, so I think that discussion was perfect. That was a great segue to what we're going to talk about now. The first thing I want to do is mention that right now, our DC government employees are already talking about a lot of the things that you have already just mentioned. So they're already talking about what might we do to support our employees, what might we do to support the public wide. And so they're talking about maybe we could create AI trainings. What do they need? And so I thought this would be a great group to ask. What could they do? Now, I'm not promising anything, okay? No promises here. But I wanted to make sure that I could give them information they can use. I wanted to take this information back to them and say, this is what they said they want, and then they can use that information to go forth and hopefully create something that'll be useful. So we are going to give them some information they can start off with. All right, are we ready for our first question?
Next slide.
Almost. So while they're getting it ready, you're gonna need your cell phones. So if you can get your cell phones ready. Here is your first question. If DC government were to offer AI trainings designed for residents, so this is focusing on residents, okay? On what would you like to see the trainings focus? And you have to just pick one. I know you might want all of them, I know. But what's your top priority? What would you like them to start with? Like the first training that came out that we produced, what would you like it to be? Go ahead and make your choice. And when you're done, we'll see how you voted. Okay, thinking hard over there. So we made our choices. Taking a couple people scanning. Settled. Everyone feels about done? You made your choices? We're good? We're ready to reveal the results? Let's see what you picked. That's all right. Uh-oh, there we go. Click it again. All right. Ooh, a nice spread. Okay, so AI literacy is where most of you are, but only about a third. So you would like to teach the basics of personal use of AI. So that kind of gets at the group that you're talking about who feel overwhelmed, maybe. Start with them, make sure that they can at least get the basics, foundational understanding. And can someone tell me who chose AI literacy, teach basics? Tell me why they picked it. Anybody who picked that one? Please.
I know we just got off the mic. The main reason why is because I feel like if you know how to leverage AI personally, then you can apply those best practices across the board. So it really starts off with this personal relationship. I strongly believe in that. And once you understand how to engage with AI, then you can use rinse and repeat. Oh, AI helped me figure out what to cook for dinner. Maybe it can help me figure out how to file a report or whatever your workflow includes.
All right. What, can you go back? All right. And so we have, does anyone else want to tell me why they picked workforce development as their number one choice? That came up as our tie for number two, workforce development. Why that? And so we are documenting what you're saying. So when I go back and say, these are what they picked, I can also tell them this is why they picked it. See, I'm thinking. All right, workforce development, who picked that? Anybody want to share why? Don't be shy, people, please.
So I picked workforce development because at those times, whenever economies are developing and there's a big change, there's always an opportunity for like a region to distinguish itself, right? Like I was watching old Dirty Harry movies a couple weeks ago, and they're like, it's pre-Silicon Valley, San Francisco, right? And it hit me, I was like, oh, before like the 70s, that just wasn't part of San Francisco's identity, right? So from scratch, it became this major economic and educational hub. And it just wasn't, right? You can go back and watch movies and see that there's no footprint, right? There's no hint that that's the direction they're headed. So with workforce development, I think we already have one of the most educated workforces in America here in the DC area. I think that developing that resource that's already here to help bring jobs at a time when you can sort of change rank and like move up in the pack relative to other what would I say, like tri-state area type economic centers, it seems like a good use of our time and the kind of things that residents might be thinking about as well.
All right, y'all are really thoughtful about this. I love it. All right, who wants to share the AI safety, understanding safe and responsible use of AI? Please. I think we have a mic in the back.
So. Speak. Hello. Okay. Yeah. So I'm one of the people that helped Chelsea over at the library on some AI AI for workforce development focused programming. One of the things that I think is the case is a lot of the incentives are already around people self-serving in terms of starting to learn how to use AI for increases in productivity and entertainment, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the dangers of AI in this case is, and one of the reasons why I think Chelsea was talking a lot about making sure you're with other people, is it ends up creating an echo chamber and you can go down some pretty dangerous rabbit holes. And people, like one person I know is familiar with some folks up in Syracuse where a researcher ended up spending like 300 hours thinking they were making like a huge scientific breakthrough. So I think for the government, making sure that folks are staying in reality and that they will be using it for their own workforce, like their own development and their own entertainment, and therefore helping to provide that safety net to make sure that they're on the right path.
I like that, safety first. Okay. All right, so help me, if someone could. So when I go back to our folks and I say, this is the data I have, they might say, this still seems very mixed. I don't know which direction to go in. Does anyone have an argument for why it should be one or the other? Like you've told me why that one, but like, how do I make a case? Does anyone have a reason why one of the top three should be the one?
Hello. Actually, I have a case for making number 4, AI and education, number 1. I kind of agree with, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name, but Brendan, for kind of describing how there's lots of incentives already around some of the other pieces. And I think it's probably government plus nonprofit plus industry plus community together on all of these. But with AI and education in particular, I think a lot of our approach in education has been to ban and to restrict, which I think does have a role, especially to increase kind of critical thinking skills. But we still have to have an offer, some type of solution to offer people, like students in particular, a way to navigate it. And we probably have more of a burden as a community and as a city and as a government to offer that. And I'll give you some stories. Like some of my nieces and nephews, every week they're finding a new way to get around the ChatGPT blocks for their testing and their lockdown. And it's actually creative. Like that type of thinking is actually great for them, probably long term to get creative with it. But they're using it no matter what. So I think we have to accept. We can create scenarios where they can sit and focus and do their writing without using ChatGPT, but they're going to be using it. So we should find a way to like help them apply it in a productive way.
Okay, that's another great explanation. I don't know how to pick. So anyone help me pick? Yes, please.
Well, I think some of those you should roll in.
Are you going to combine them?
You should, so safety, you should roll that into AI basics and workforce development, AI and education. You could just include that.
One training of all of them.
No. Put safety within each or any of those, and ethics probably as well. Yeah, and then. But between literacy, workforce development, education, I would go 1 to 3 maybe. Start with 1, depending on who you are, who your audience is.
I'm a guest, but I will steal the mic to argue for something that is not up there, which is, and we have, but I make this case and am coming with a present, with a gift, which is we have developed free training in what we call civic AI. So it is how you as a member of a community both learn AI basics, learn that literacy, but so you can interact with government, write a letter about your social security check, write a letter to your member of Congress, communicate with your neighbors around cleaning up the park. So how we think about both acting as a community as we think about AI. There's a lot of material out there pushed by the tech companies that's free around, commercial uses of AI. And we felt there was really a big gap around what we're doing as citizens and as community members in a democracy. So I think we can get AI literacy, ethics, and safety, and at the same time talk as a community. But I will say the other thing is that it is getting so much easier and faster with AI to create content that you can do it all. You don't have to choose.
I love that. You can have it all. Okay, all right. Did anyone else want to share their thoughts on what they picked before we move to our second question? Because I'm here to listen. That's what this is all about. All right, let's move to question 2. So the second question is focusing on the same thing, but now from the perspective of employees, DC government employees, so a different audience. So get your phones out and go ahead and vote. So for DC government employees, where do you think we should focus? Now, keep in mind, we already do have a wonderful AI training. So that's why some of the topics are a little different. The options are a little different there. All right. Like we got a couple folks still trying to decide. Choices. How do you make a choice? We're feeling about done. I don't want to rush you now. Seeing heads up, y'all look about done. Ready to see results? Okay, let's see. Okay, still pretty nice, even split there. Okay, so 35% want hands-on practice with specific AI tools. All right, can someone tell me why they picked that one? Please.
So, from back there, you probably can't see these grades, but I'm old enough to remember when I was in high school, we had OJT. How many people know what that stands for? On the job training, right? And so there's a difference between theory and practice. And I think that the more you practice at something, the better you get at it, right? You can talk about it all day, but if you're not in the weeds with this technology as a teammate, then you're gonna fall short. So I picked hands-on practice with specific AI tools because not every tool is made for everyone. There's no one size fits all. There's no one carbon copy for AI. It's really, as I mentioned, that personal journey. So hands-on practice with specific AI tools that are relevant to your work makes complete sense to me.
All right, so our second choice option was AI for decision-making. Who chose that? Don't be nervous, it's okay, it's a great answer.
Any members of the public want to get comment? I'd love to hear from you guys.
That would be nice.
I agree.
Any in the room, don't be nervous, no bad answers. I'm coming to you next.
Does this work out already? Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
So I am in fact a member of the public who just
Love it.
helps the library as a private citizen. But I think on this note, I would to take a page from our colleagues at the front in saying, I think it's a bit of a yes and for a lot of these, where a practice of innovation, design and innovation on behalf of the government employees who are close to the problems as a creative tool. AI, so it include decision making and practice. They need a lot of these to do so, but where the costs of innovating new tools or new workflows and testing them now are so low that a lot of people really close to those problems can start innovating new ways of working and tool sets that can serve the public more effectively. But it'll be that experimental mindset that Chelsea talked about earlier. That'll be really important.
Awesome. And so wait, is that in reference to which one?
A bit of all. So hands-on practice is part, but it includes decision-making and
Okay.
ethics and prompt engineering, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
But innovation and trying new things is the biggest thing. Yeah.
And I love innovation, so that's a great answer. All right.
Yep, so I selected AI for decision making primarily just because we work in DC. It's a very political town. There are a lot of different types of people who live in the city. And sometimes it does feel like our politicians can get lost in the weeds or be, I guess, so in the ivory tower that sometimes they miss the forest for the trees. I do think AI does give us an opportunity to think about things in a different manner. If we presume that the goal of policy is the highest good for the most number of people, ideally, our elected officials should be listening to what we have to say, but also ingesting as much information as possible to get that outcome of the highest good for most people.
I love that. So some of that civic involvement, you're hoping for more of that with the AI tool. I love that. All right, and I will open the floor for one more person.
That's one of my primary concerns. I'm a citizen, I'm a new DC Gov employee, but forgive me for that. The idea of AI for decision making is wonderful if you know where they got their answers from, or if you trust where they got their answers from. Sometimes you don't know how it's prompted. You don't know, it's a mishmash of different opinions, and that can be good to someone who's seasoned in research. But if they don't know their topics, or if they don't know the basic research that goes into coming up with an answer, then AI is gonna maybe cause more problems than answers.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. All right, and so that concludes our session here. Thank you so much for your votes and the information you shared. My colleague Marisa was documenting the qualitative feedback that you provided. All of this will be shared with the folks who are at Octo who are doing this work and doing this thinking. And we look forward to continuing this conversation.
Thank you, Lindsay. Okay, so that was great. Really appreciate the conversation there. We're getting ready for our next panel. So our next panel takes on questions that I know are top of mind for the business community. What are the legal and ethical guardrails around AI? What do we need to know to protect your clients, your data, and your practice? To lead that conversation, I'm turning to someone who has been in the middle of these questions for the district and has helped me bring together some of the leading minds on AI and law right here in this room. Todd Smith is Octo's general counsel and has been a key part of how the district thinks through the legal and ethical dimensions of AI governance. He's also someone who will text me 24 hours a day about his research on AI. So Todd and panel, the floor is yours. Thank you so much. We'll make sure we got mics.
Hi, everybody. With me today is Amber Ivy. She's a vice president at Social Finance and has been advising organizations on AI since before the current LLM boom, which is a rare credential nowadays. And Erica Stillabout, who is the FOIA officer and ethics counsel at DC's OAG, or Office of the Attorney General. Erica works with me over the last 2 years, giving this 2-month-long course for DC Bar that takes attorneys all the way from the mathematical foundations of AI to like actual practice questions they'll hit during their work day. So just to sort of frame our discussion, we were talking last week in advance of this panel, and I mentioned that I was a fan of the Dick Cavett show. And the reason I bring that up is I like whenever a panel erupts into a conversation, so I will have failed if we can't get a conversation going rather than me just spurring questions one after another. So what we're shooting for is kind of a dialogue with Amber and Erica, with me here as a resource. The first question I want to bounce to you guys, since you've both dealt with this in very different environments, is whenever you are trying to help an organization, whether it's a small business or a government entity or just a single licensed professional, adopt an AI tool, right? How do you advise someone in the trade-off between sort of the risk of adopting a tool that is new and that they haven't worked with before, weighed against the cost of not adopting a tool that their competitors might be using?
So I was trying to remember if I was first or second, so that's where you saw the pause for a second on that. But happy to meet you all. I have a vested interest in this because my initials are AI. So I either need this to be successful, so I need you all to walk out of here feeling really good about what we talk about today. One of the things you may often hear, have folks heard the terminology do no harm? Okay, so do no harm normally means like push the brakes, don't move forward, don't walk into that. But do no harm also means if you're not catching up or you're not keeping up with what's happening in technology, not bringing yourself up can also cause harm to people. So the way I like to think about when I talk to mostly governments about AI adoption, I work with governments to help them launch AI before they go through the vendor or procurement process to help them try it out. One thing I recommend is that they don't come to the table talking about AI first. And I know this sounds a little weird, being that we're in a room about AI, but I ask folks to bring their problem first. So bring your problem and let's see if AI is a solution for that. And then as we go through that process, we get to ask the questions and pull that apart. And when we're thinking about risk, for me, it's really making sure the naysayer is in the room. So the person you know on your team who is likely to say, no, this is not going to work. I want them there because I want them to bring up the risk. I want them to bring up the things we should be thinking about, and also having the champion in the room. The person who's going to be like, this is amazing, this is great. And working alongside both of those people to bring them along. Because if you can get the champion and the naysayer to build something together, it's very hard to pull that thing apart. And it helps a lot when you're thinking about adopting these technologies, but also it raises the risks that are happening within the tools as well.
That's very good advice. And I'll tell everyone, this is actually a really good example of technology right here on the panel, because here I am with my notebook, and I actually upgraded from a pencil to a pen before I came over here. And we have a remarkable tablet right here. I am probably less tech savvy and a little bit more AI avoidant than anyone else on the panel here tonight. But I do appreciate the fact that we could fall behind, or we risk falling behind, if we don't start thinking about AI and thinking about how it can help us. Maybe there are ways we haven't even thought about where it can help us. But my two goals, whenever I'm thinking about, do we want to use AI, or first, what are we going to use it for? Give me a specific task. Why do we need AI? Where do we think it's going to bring improvements? I also like to think about, well, show me other people. Show me people who are in a similar position to me who have been able to use it successfully. In my position, I don't feel the need to be first out of the gate with any sort of technology whatsoever. So I don't mind sitting back and looking for examples of entities, of organizations, other lawyers that have successfully deployed AI. And as a lawyer, you can imagine, I see lots of examples of lawyers who have failed to deploy AI appropriately, much to their chagrin. So coming at it from a slightly different angle there, but I like to see a use case, and I'd like to see, again, what's the problem we're trying to solve, as Amber highlighted.
I want to kind of seize on something you said, Amber. You used the phrase "do no harm," and you guys, I was bugging you guys about this paper last week to say this wind-up might sound familiar, but there was an interesting paper that came out of the Harvard School of Public Health in April of this year. It has a subtitle that's far longer, but the top title is IATRO Bench, and it's a benchmarking tool that's been introduced by a doctor at the Harvard School of Public Health. And what it's meant to do is sort of identify when safety training has been applied too stringently to an LLM, right? The idea being that there are situations where withholding conversation, withholding simple solutions in a given context actually causes harm. The example that the paper gives is what is it? And I'm not a doctor, so forgive me if I'm misstating any of this part, but basically a drug taper, whenever someone has a prescription that's running out and they can't get that prescription easily renewed, there's a medically correct way that's just standard answer in the field or whatever for anyone that is a practicing physician or whatever, as to how you would taper off to avoid like the serious side effects of a sharp cessation in a powerful drug. And this information, is in any generally large language model, right? It's in general pre-training because it's in freely available standards and things like that that are open and published. But what they found out in this study was that the concern about being the cause of potential harm, that is like the language model itself providing information that you normally want to provide to a unlicensed person, someone who's not a doctor, even when that person's dealing with their own medical emergency, holding back that information, which was just this consequence of too much safety training in this particular instance, actually causes harm, right? People then are guaranteed to have a negative medical outcome because the tool was hedging too much and avoiding discussing a sensitive topic when it needed to be discussed, right? Whenever a medical professional wasn't available. So with this idea of, where hesitance can itself cause harm, right? Where the decision to decline to adopt a tool that is proliferating can itself be a source of harm. Is there anywhere that you have seen in your work situations where you think, and this can also be on the near horizon, but situations where you think for us to behave ethically, for us to practice ethically, whatever our profession might be, we may have to adopt a tool, right? Where the tool may set a new standard of care. Does anyone want to jump in and help address this point?
I'll jump in on this one and start off. First of all, the idea of gatekeeping information makes me either want to roll my eyes or question. I don't think government in general wants to be in the business of gatekeeping information. Now, how that translates for small businesses or large businesses or other professionals, I'm not entirely sure, but the idea of withholding information because we're afraid it might be misused, that chills me a little bit. On the other hand, the other sort of safety feature or that I think many of us want to see on AI that is deployed perhaps in our businesses would be things that prevent people from using it to create images that are offensive or things like that. I don't know if those are the same ideas or not, the same sorts of blocks or limits on the user's ability to generate output.
Do you think it's like this is for both of you guys. Do you think it's like a general AI literacy burden that develops as we see more penetration into all of these different markets and regulated fields? Like, do we need, just from we're all JDs. I don't know if I didn't say that introduction. We're all attorneys, but it is the shifting of sort of the floor, the standard of care that you owe to everyone you interact with, whether you're a licensed professional or anyone doing any kind of business or working for the government, right? This idea of the general standard of care you owe someone once you have to start to interact with them. Is that what we're talking about when we talk about the being aware of these safety concerns?
I have two examples. You made me think about something. So part of my work, like I was saying earlier, I run a co-lead an initiative called the AI Learning and Innovation Hub, and it helps governments try AI before they buy, because governments, like many of you all who are in regulated industries, are nervous of tripping up and putting these tools out in a way that harms people. So we help them try out the tool in a sandbox or a closed playground where they can play around with it, test it before they even go to a vendor. And there's actually, I'm not going to name the place, there's a city nearby that we work with to build an AI code tool, because one of the problems they're having, particularly with business owners, is the code process is hard. For business code, building code, all the codes is very hard. So at some point, they're like, we already have an antiquated system. It's not helping people. We're actually probably holding back our economic mobility, holding back folks from being able to become first-time home buyers or building their first home, or small businesses. We made it harder. So in that instance, they're like, AI can help push past that. So let's do it. Let's build it. Let's try it. That's on one side. The other thing you mentioned around AI literacy, I talked to folks, I was talking to you about this yesterday, about AI literacy from 5-year-olds to cabinet secretaries. Like that's the range of people that should all be at some baseline level AI literate for us to even answer this question, because that's what I'm struggling with a bit. It's like, we're still trying to get people up to like, what is this thing we're dealing with? How should we use it? What is safe? What is risky? And we're not there yet as a culture, as a community, because it's so new, it's moving so quickly, and folks, rightfully so, are a little bit risk averse.
So Amber, this idea of, what would I say? The level of expertise we all kind of need, I think is interesting and cues up a question I have for Erica about ethics generally, right? So you are well aware that attorneys have a continuing duty to be at least literate in those new technologies that are relevant to their practice, and it can actually be an ethics violation, like a formal charged by bar counsel ethics violation to remain ignorant in an area of technology that's relevant to their practice in a way that like hurts their clients. What I would ask is, when are we, what would I not want to say put a date on it, but how quickly do you feel like we're going to see general AI literacy be, specifically in your experience, because again, this extrapolates out to any licensed profession, but with attorneys, part of that baseline competence that's necessary to avoid just violating an actual literal hard ethics rule?
I think we're a ways away from that, and in part, the most common misuse of AI that we see for lawyers is they submit briefs, they submit motions to court that contain false and hallucinated citations to legal authority. It happens over and over and over again. And it's a little bit painful to watch because the lawyer who is doing this often makes the case that they simply didn't know, or even worse, they spoke with someone that they had a lot of confidence in and had a lot of trust in based on a long working relationship with this other lawyer or another staffer in their office, and something fell through the cracks, right? And I don't know that anyone wants to go out and extract a pound of flesh for someone who made an error that people are making all the time. So I think but courts are happy to impose monetary sanctions, right? Clients are free to sue a lawyer for malpractice if they feel that their lawyer fell well below the standard of care. So those might be the initial sort of penalties that lawyers really feel, and which sort of forces even the holdout to develop a little bit more literacy. I think that is, but in general, I think lawyers even today have an obligation to start understanding enough about AI that they can counsel their client on what they're seeing, right? An opposing party provides some really convincing and persuasive evidence, right? And the client is saying this can't be possible, and the lawyer can either say, well, there's hard photographic evidence here, you clearly did this, or you intruded on their property line. A lawyer has to be able to begin to think, well, maybe we need to press on this evidence a little bit. Let's make sure it's rock solid. So even today, lawyers have that obligation. Again, I think the penalties for failing a client in that way are probably going to be more in the line of malpractice than an actual ethics charge at this point.
So this next question is for both of you guys. In advance of this meeting, our sister agency, the LCP, the Department of Licensing and Consumer Protection, did some good polling and got some interesting answers back from business owners and licensed professionals. One of the key things they were concerned about with AI adoption was ethics, right? Like the wonderful thing about data is it's only broken out as or so granular as it was at the time that you did your poll. So it's not super clear whether this is just like general business ethics or like formal ethical standards like attorneys and doctors and accountants and stuff might have. But if you were, and this is for both of you, if you were advising an organization, just in the broadest sense, right? So no one's offering legal advice, but in the broadest sense, if you're advising an organization, what kind of general roadmap would you give them for, what would I say, keeping ethics front of mind the whole time they're making their adoption and deployment decision?
One of the things that's interesting in the work I do with government is that they're asking to build that roadmap before they've ever used the tool. So there's this weird world of like, especially with your business, you're trying to figure out what are the red lines that I won't cross when you've never possibly used it or you're trying to figure it out. So what I do recommend for folks to think about, and a lot of folks apply this, is a red, yellow, green type philosophy. Like, what are the things that red is like, what are the legal implications that can cause harm? We can end up in jail, have to pay a fine, we break a law. Like, what are those things? What are they really? And putting those in one bucket. And we know that we will never do this or use AI for this. Then it's like yellow. We're not as comfortable with this. There's no law against it. I may bump up against the naysayer who doesn't want to use it, so let's consider what these use cases are. Then it's green. Here's where you all can go use it as much as you want. There's no limitations. Having the red, yellow, green has helped people to have a little bit of the guardrails around as they're learning how to use it, because I think many of you in the room are also trying to figure out how to use it, and you don't want to have this whole long governance policy that may or may not be helpful, but starting with the red, yellow, green traffic light is something that I know folks use.
And Erica, you have any general advice you give to an organization if they're like trying to keep ethics front of mind while they were looking at like AI deployment?
I like the idea of the red, yellow, green. I can tell you for us at in a government agency, even creating those buckets of risk is really hard, and there is a lot of disagreement, and we probably need someone like Amber to come and talk some sense into us. But I think once you can assess what the risks are, and again, I think if this is a room full of licensed professionals in different fields, you're going to have so much different kind of risk depending on what you're doing, right? I mean, accountants are going to have all this confidential tax filer information, sort of analogous to what the types of information that lawyers have. Health professionals are going to have something entirely different and be worried about HIPAA and those sorts of violations as well. One thing that's sort of interesting, I think, for me to grapple with as we're trying to introduce AI is that we want everyone to become AI literate in general, right? I mean, I am using AI on the weekends. I use it a little bit at work with the, our OAG platforms, but then on the weekends, I'm like, well, let me just play with Claude. Let me try ChatGPT. I want to understand this. You're actually catching me. I had a very unsatisfying chat with Claude this weekend on a matter. I'm like really disappointed about the whole thing. But that's something I'm trying to encourage people to do with the line that don't enter your work information into ChatGPT or Claude over the weekend. I do want you to think about things. You're free to ask it legal questions. Don't put anything confidential in there. Don't tell them what you're working on. Say, what is give me a summary of the Bill of Rights and compare it to other, governing documents for, other democracies that are, peers of ours. Have fun with it that way. So again, these are all challenges though, and it's very easy to just sort of start asking questions that you have from your work, right? And at that point, we get a little bit concerned about what's going in and what's coming out and how it's getting back into our agency, if at all.
So one of the things we haven't spoken a lot about, and there's a good reason to get into, is sort of what the law requires. And one of the reasons that we haven't talked a lot about what the law requires is actually not a lot of the law on AI at this point, not just in the United States, but globally, right? So the EU AI Act you've seen has had delays. I think it was the most recent delay was announced like 2 or 3 weeks ago in deadlines for specific provisions and the publication of specific standards that they will be holding in high risk AI use cases too, and things like that. I think there's 2 interesting things going on in China. One is around algorithmic pricing protection. The other is around what they call like emotional AI tools. So if the tool is intended to like continue on an emotionally invested conversation with its user or whatever, they, I think in the last week or 2, rolled out some new restrictions there. But really, I mean, in the US, you have some stuff state to state, but not really anything national. And even if you look like state by state, there's only about 3 states I can think of off the top of my head that have even attempted to do anything sort of like a broad AI statute. In the absence of new law that sets out specific to AI, obligations or duties of care or identified roles like the EU system uses for its risk grading. What if you're advising an organization? What considerations should they think about whenever they are looking at a specific tool, right? So they have a tool, they bring their lawyer into the room and they ask you, What do I need to be concerned with? Is this just, do you point them toward existing privacy rules? Do you point them toward existing restrictions on their use of data or existing consumer protection laws? What are the kinds of things that are front of mind for you?
So I'm gonna talk like I'm talking to the 5-year-olds I talk to for a second, then I'll say something different. But one thing I often say to people doing this, like the same things that apply in regular life apply to this tool. Like this is a new technology and the law hasn't fully caught up. To your point, there's like dozens, if not like a large number of like laws that are trying to get through state houses right now on this stuff. But the thing I often tell kids, I'm like, don't talk to strangers. What does don't talk to strangers mean? You don't download an app or an AI that you don't know, that you don't have information on, that you haven't read its terms and conditions. So that's like the baseline level of, there's things you all know as business leaders, y'all have been doing this for a very long time. When your gut feels it, there's that part of life, right? But then there's like the more practical side of things of like, what do I do? If you are a business and you are using AI seriously in your business, you need an enterprise account. The enterprise account is basically a upgraded version of the AI that keeps your data protected. It doesn't train on your data, which is huge. To your point around like, if you're putting stuff in there, it is training on it when you're using these free accounts or even your own paid account. It needs to be in an enterprise so that your organization has your data protected. And then it can also link to your other things. And most of us have Microsoft or Google or whatever that we're using. They all have enterprise-wide accounts to protect you. So that's something else to consider. And the other thing around like just data privacy in general, back to what I tell young people, like, don't talk to strangers, meaning don't put your social security number in there, where you live, your personal information. What does that look like for your business? Don't share financials if you know are private. Don't share these things, especially if you don't have an enterprise-wide account. So thinking about it from how would I assess this in my normal life and have again that naysayer come in and help you like poke holes. The person's always going to tell you it's not going to work, it's horrible. You want that person here, so they can help you to identify the areas in this work that you may not be paying attention to. So that's one thing I would say.
I would say that you probably warmed the heart of every cybersecurity professional in the room whenever you mentioned enterprise accounts. That's one of we use the term shadow IT, I guess, whenever we're talking about organizations and whenever people are using, the AI in their pocket rather than the AI on their work issued device. So every CISO and deputy CISO in DC government's heart just fluttered when you said enterprise, use the enterprise account.
That is true.
Absolutely. Erica, I just want to get your thoughts on the same question.
I mean, I probably echo a lot of what Amber said. I mean, especially when it comes to like, the free AI platforms, much like social media. I think one thing that just resonates with people, the reason they're free is because you are the product. And you can, if you want to be the product for any social media account, that is up to you, in your private time. But we're not going to turn our clients into a product without them knowing about it or making sure that that's the right decision. I mean, that's probably never going to be the right decision, right? So again, we put that guardrail on there. The other thing I will say is, as much pressure as there is to really, start to use AI, and AI is changing the world, I think I've been hearing that for close to 4 years now, right? I've been at the DC bar looking at AI and the ethics around the use of AI for lawyers prior to my current job. And I think back then they were saying, within 18 months, the practice of law is going to look totally different. And at the point, it was kind of, I believe them. And, here we are 3.5 years later, maybe more, and we're still grappling with the same issues we were back then, right? And the AI is getting better. Certainly, I think there's been more and more uptake, in our communities, and we're going to have to make sure that we are keeping up. But I'm not sure it's been the tsunami that we were told to prepare for, and that makes me feel comfortable saying I'm listening, but I'm not jumping fully on board to whatever product looks great right now, because of the fear that I'm going to be horribly left behind if I haven't done this within 6 months.
In the spirit of conversation, I agree 100%. The other thing that I've been thinking about recently is like just the limitations of large language models, which is basically the AI that we all have access to. There are multiple versions of AI. The one that we're talking about is large language models, which are, as you may have heard, token predictors or text predictors. So they have limitations. That's why you have hallucinations and all this stuff. Keeping that in mind, to your point, figure out which AI makes sense for you, especially if you're new. Try one out in the protected place of enterprise or using anonymous words or anonymous details in a free one, but try one out. You do not need to keep up with all the billions of things that are happening. It feels like you need to. I'm a person who works in this space with government and I can't. Like, it's not physically possible. The people who are building it can't. So they're even like, if you follow them online, they're even like, it's moving so fast. So just pick one that you like, figure out what works best for you, or try a few things through pilots in your organization to see what makes sense. But I would recommend, like, we can all take a beat for sure.
Yeah, just to follow up on that real quick. Whenever you say that, so, thank you. Whenever you say that there's so many tools out, but they're all just language models, it is worth noting for the crowd that like we're still on the same transformer architecture that was introduced in 2017.
Yeah.
Like the newest tools you use are they have three components, right? They have feed-forward layers that are MLPs. They have MLP is multi-layer perceptron. They have self-attention mechanisms, and they operate on token embeddings. Like the core technology hasn't changed meaningfully since 2017 with the introduction of Transformer. While I have you both here, I was inspired by Dr. Lindsay Quarles. I want to see if maybe we can get a question from the audience. This is me being ambitious. So we got one in the back. Do I have a microphone running?
We do. Yeah. So, 1 second. Yeah.
Yeah, so I want to thank you guys for this really great conversation. I kind of wanted to address like the pink elephant in the room and see if it can be addressed from a legal perspective. You guys talked about hesitation with regards to adoption and things of that nature on the part of the public. I think a lot of that comes from what they're reading in the media, fear of losing their jobs due to AI. Since I feel like I have the Justice League in this room when it comes to AI right here, I wanted to ask you guys the question. People are talking about losing jobs, right? But there's nobody talking about, well, where do the people who lose their jobs, where do they go? Can that be addressed from a legal perspective, like a regulatory perspective per se, wherein if you were to go and pitch AI to a company, you say, okay, well, there's a percentage of your employees that will be lost, but let's plan for where they can go. Is that something that can be baked in and then presented to the public, which I think would help to address the concerns that are legitimate that people have? In other words, the technology is coming, it's going to replace some jobs, hopefully create new jobs. Well, let's talk about those new jobs. Train those people for those new jobs. Can we do that from a legal or regulatory perspective? Your thoughts?
So I have a long answer, so I'll let you two both lead off, and then I'll follow up with my long answer that'll probably eat the rest of our time. We talk about adjudicates, by the way, which I'll define that term whenever we get there.
I'm gonna actually respond with a non-legal, just what I see happening in the field. Part of my day job is working in workforce. So the thing we are thinking about is helping. We support some of the work we do is we support training. And one of the concerns we've had, we've invested in all this training across the country, and now we're at this place. There are conversations happening, hopefully news will show soon, about things that are happening to help do exactly what you said, train people in the workforce. So there are things coming, hopefully in the next few weeks, that would be help you think through that. And other folks are thinking about that problem and working on that. The piece I want to say for business owners here is that when you are incorporating these things into your work, we don't know in the field what's going to happen with skills. If we have an idea like on a skill level, like critical thinking or data entry or like these things, but even the brightest minds are still trying to figure out. So I wouldn't say like, let's predict all the way, but let's prepare. Let's make sure we think about that. So as you're thinking about your own industries, I would stay close to what are the areas that you should be thinking about. Three things. It's in leadership, I think it's called Leading in AI is the book. But what should you own as a human, meaning that you should never let AI do. You're just great at it. You should keep building that skill. You should become the best human you can on the things that you own. Whatever that is for you, public speaking, writing, whatever that is, don't let AI touch it. Then there's augment. What are the things that AI can help me do better? We can be co-partners or co-pilot together and work together on it. What are those tasks and those skills? And then last, what are the automate? The thing you don't care about doing in the first place. I hate PowerPoints now that Claude is, oh my gosh. The amount of PowerPoints I made with Claude has like substantially saved so much time, because clearly I went to college to make PowerPoints and I didn't know that. But so that's something to just consider, like what are the things that AI can fully automate? And those are things you don't want to do in the first place. And think about that and then go hard on the own, get better, be an expert, get your zone of genius to the point that no one else can touch you when it comes to the things you own.
You know what, I'm gonna punch you, Todd, and let you start. I'm not sure I'm ever gonna be the best person to answer this question, but let's see what you say.
So I'll try to make this a lot tighter than it normally is, because it's a long answer because it gets in depth. The first thing I would say is I don't think that job loss is even the right word. I think there's always going to be some kind of interruption, but interruption is a much better term than loss. I've gone through, just personally, everybody in my graduating class, whenever I was back in law school, went through an interruption, right? Whenever 2008 happened, mergers and acquisitions stopped. Law firms quit hiring, right? Law firms here in town that hired 24 summer associates for full-time jobs every year dropped to classes of like 2, right? Our debt burdens were the same. There were just no jobs, right? So for a few years, it's unpleasant. And I'm not saying that cavalierly, because I suffered through it, right? Like, so I've been there, and you'll see that with like some with coding and some with call centers are the 2 places I've seen the most affected so far. But it's probably not job loss. It's probably job interruption, which always happens. And the reason is, and this is one of the reasons, what would I say? Why we encourage getting really in depth. And whenever Eric and I teach that course for DC bar attorneys, the last 2 years, we start from mathematical foundations and work up. I think that's the only way to really understand at all what's going on. AI tools don't think and they don't copy human behavior. What they are a new cost-efficient way to perform a task called function approximation. In other words, if you have, what's the best way to say this? For a given function, if you have the inputs and the outputs, but you don't know the function, don't know the actual formula that is transforming inputs to outputs, if you have enough data examples, right? So paired input outputs, you can, from those, using neural networks, which all the AI tools we're talking about are neural network based, you can infer the series of transformations you need to impose on inputs to get an in-distribution output, right? Whenever you describe it in that way, whenever you understand what we're talking about is large-scale efficient function approximation, it's 1,000 times less scary. And all the arguments about it being conscious and all that are exactly patently as absurd as they are in substance, right? So whenever we say job loss, maybe that would happen if this was sci-fi AI. It's not, right? We're talking about function approximation. So where you can express as a function a part of a job, that may in the future, over time, be able to be automated, right? That doesn't mean that whole sections of the workforce are going to fall out of existence. My reference to adjudages earlier is so before calculus, so what we're talking about when we say large-scale function approximation is a new way to do a new kind of math quickly, right? The closest parallel isn't like the Industrial Revolution or anything like that, because that's not a new kind of math, right? It's just different manufacturing habits, right? Workflows. Whenever I say a new kind of math, the closest parallel I know of is like the discovery of calculus. And the heartwarming thing here is that pre-calculus, we did a lot less work and we had a lot lower standard of living, a lot more people were out of work, right? And then post-calculus, we were doing jobs we didn't know existed before because you couldn't do them, right? An adjudage is for, controlling the flow in the Roman aqueducts of water because they couldn't estimate flow over time because they didn't have the math to do it, right? So you had a bunch of weird jobs, which was measuring these little long pipes called adjudages to guess at how much water someone's using to build them, month over month. And whenever we had the advent of calculus, you lose this one strange job that in retrospect looks absurd, right? But at the time would have been a normal, you might brag that your niece was, or your nephew or whatever it was. He's the new adjudage checker, in Northern Illyricum or whatever, right? those jobs maybe go away and are replaced by much better jobs. And why do I feel confident saying that? Because it's every time we learn a new way to do math at scale, just as humans, human life improves, right? And with that, I think we're at time. So I'm going to turn it over to our Assistant City Administrator, who has been leading our efforts on AI for, I guess, three years now on the on this AI advisory group, Dr. Christopher Rodriguez.
Thanks, Todd. Let's give the panel a round of applause. All right, well, I want to thank everyone for coming out here tonight. And, you know, these types of gatherings and meetings is exactly what the mayor's order envisioned, and particularly having public input, input from our panels. I want to thank Joe, Lindsay, Todd for facilitating the panel discussions. Thank you to our panelists as well for being here. I want to thank my co-chair, Stacy. Also, CTO Miller and his team. You know, it takes a lot to put these types of events together. So I want to thank you, Director Miller, Richard Green, the whole team really that's here. Thank you so much for putting this on. The library closes shortly, so I want to make sure that, you know, any discussions that happen, if you could just take them outside. We have folks here who want to get home to their families. I'm sure you do as well. And but thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to more discussions. Thank you.
Brad Winston, CIO over. Oh, yeah. How you settling in? Good.